here we go. That was really weird. I'm so used to having shielding gas. Hello and welcome to Challenge the Build. In today's review video, I will be taking a look at the model 250D MIG welder from Simder. Now, full disclosure in this video, Simder did contact me directly and asked me to do an unboxing and review video on this MIG welder. So I agreed. They sent me this welder at no cost to me, but I am required to do a review video. So that is kind of the premise for today. Starting with the unboxing, we're going to kind of open it up here and see what we get in the package. This is a MIG welder, stick welder, and lift arc TIG welder. With the TIG welding, there is no foot pedal application with this, and if you are going to do any TIG welding with it, you will need to purchase the TIG torch separately. So in the box, we have the gas hose. This is a flux core welder and a MIG welder with shielding gas. If you want to do the welding with shielding gas, they do supply you with the gas hose. However, you will need to supply your own regulator. So there are a couple different pieces that you will need to purchase depending on how you plan on using this machine. Next up, out of the box, we will get the operating manual. Let's see here. We have the stinger, which is for stick welding. And then finally, we do have the MIG torch. Now, they classify this as an aluminum MIG welder. And what that entails is, along with the MIG torch, they supply you with a graphite liner for the wire. So if you are going to do aluminum MIG welding, you will need to remove the liner and install the graphite liner here. This is just to allow the aluminum, because it's softer, to allow less friction when pushing it through the torch. So that is that. And then finally, we have the grounding clamp and the adapter to go from 220 to 110. And last but not least, the welder. It's very nicely packaged. And at first glance, it's a pretty solid looking unit. It definitely has a very kind of aggressive styling here on the front. Even get a little bit of a chrome grille for some flair. Trying to figure out what we got going on here. What I am going to do is, because this is the first time I am messing with this particular unit, something that I would recommend you do as well with any equipment that you buy or use. Take a couple of minutes and read the user manual. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm actually going to page through this, familiarize myself with this particular unit, get everything unpacked, and get this thing set up. So now that I've taken some time to read through the user manual and familiarize myself with this MIG welder, in this video, I am primarily going to focus on something that I actually don't do a lot of, and that is flux core welding. I have a 2-pound spool of 035 flux core wire, so there's a few things that we're going to have to do in setting the machine up, and that's what I'm going to go through right now. The first thing that I'm going to do is install the grounding cable, and again, this is where reading the user manual comes into play. I also went to Simder's direct website to get more information, but in order to set this up for flux core welding, you put the grounding cable in the positive lug over here, then you take the lug that is attached to the machine and insert it into the negative side. And then the torch assembly can only go in one way. You're going to want to line up the plugs and then push it in, and then there's a locking collar. You just want to screw the locking collar in till everything is snugged up. After getting the MIG torch and the grounding cable hooked up, the next thing I'm going to do is install the spool of wire. This machine has the ability to run up to an 11-pound spool using the supplied adapter. So you're going to want to take this out, put this aside in a safe location, and remember where that is when the time comes for putting a bigger spool in. Then taking the spool, this machine, when you feed the wire through, you're going to want to feed the wire in from underneath the spool into the liner for the torch. Then reversing the process, put a little tension on the spool. After that, we need to switch out the drive roller. Along with the drive rollers, they supply some consumable welding tips for the torch for different sizes. So we're going to have to take a look at that and see if we have to replace that. In order to replace the drive roller, you're going to want to pop down the tension bar to bring up the top roller. Take off the drive roller retainer. Slide it off, and then if you look at the drive rollers, you will see that they are numbered and lettered depending on what wire you are using, whether it's solid wire or flux core wire, and then obviously different sizes from 0.023 all the way up to, I believe, this one, let's see, is 1.2. Yes, so I believe that's an 0.45, so it can handle some pretty heavy wire. We are going to go with the 0.35 for the flux core. So then installing that drive roller, reversing the process, tightening it up. And now, for the moment of truth, turning on the machine for the first time. So here we go. You can clearly hear the fan running on the unit. It's moving a considerable amount of air, so that should help with the duty cycle and keeping it cool. So now that the machine is up and running, the first thing that I noticed right off the bat is the plastic cover that is protecting the LCD screen is kind of installed in such a fashion that the clarity is a little foggy. If I push in on the cover, the display becomes a lot more clear. So that doesn't keep me from being able to read the display. I don't think the video really translates the clarity issue as well. But as far as the overall display on this, what we have here is the wire size. By pushing this button here, we're going to stick it with 09, which is 035. Over here we have the selection as far as shielding gas. We have mixed shielding gas, 100% CO2, flux core, also aluminum with argon at 100%. So we are going to leave it to the flux core setting. This button here allows you to feed the wire through the torch without using shielding gas, so that's kind of a nice feature. We'll use that in just a second. In synergic welding mode, the machine takes all of the inputs and then spits out a relative formula for the best welding application. So as you can see, if I raise the amperage, the voltage also changes. Along with that, it would also change the wire speed as well. In synergic welding mode, it gives you the ability to dial in up to 5 volts positive or minus 5 volts depending on the material thickness. And all synergic welding is again, it just kind of simplifies the welding process. If this was in manual mode, then you, the welder, would have to determine the proper input as far as voltage and then your wire speed to ultimately give you the best weld possible. So for this particular welding test, I am going to leave it in synergic mode and have the 2T function. So this way here, it's just push and hold the torch and then release when done welding. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to feed the wire through the torch assembly and then practice doing some flux core welding. So the final step before I get into doing any welding is I am going to feed through the wire into the torch. And like I said earlier, the wire is meant to feed from underneath the spool into the torch assembly. Tighten up the drive roller, and either using the trigger on the torch or the feed button here on the display, before you start feeding the wire through, you're going to want to remove the nozzle and the tip, and then pushing the feed button. All we have to do is just wait for it to arrive at this end. And there it is. Put the tip back in, the nozzle. Trim it up. And now I am ready to weld. Quick safety rundown. You're going to want to make sure that you have some gloves. Definitely need a helmet. Sometimes you would want to either wear an apron or a welding jacket, depending on what you are welding and the process that you are welding. For the welding portion of this, I have a little bit of 16 gauge material. I have 1/8 inch and all the way up to 1/4 inch. So we'll see how this does through those thicknesses. Now, I have not flux core welded in a very, very long time. So this will be interesting, and I figured it would be fun to do to show, hopefully, the ease of the unit if you are just starting out in the welding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 1/8 inch material and having the machine set at right around 17 volts in the 2T function with synergic welding. I have 035 flux core, and early on in the video I set the welder up to be able to flux core weld. So with that, I got it grounded. I'm actually kind of nervous here. It's been forever. And not only is it my first time welding with flux core in a long time, I don't even remember the last time I did this, it is the first time welding with this machine. Also note, I am running this off of my generator. So I'm using 220 volts, and I have a 40 amp breaker hooked up to this welding plug. So here we go. The first weld with the Simder 250D. and I am using 035 flux core wire. And here we go. That was really weird. I'm so used to having shielding gas. I need to go get a wire brush. But all things considered, that's not a bad weld for the first one. I'm gonna try it again. So I am actually having quite a bit of fun here. Because it's been so long with me doing any flux core welding, it's allowing me to kind of learn the process along with learning the machine at the same time. And considering this is the first time I'm using this machine, it's very intuitive and very easy to use. Over the last couple of welds, I was going within the parameters and adjusting the amperage up and down, along with kind of fine-tuning the voltage up and down a little bit. And then with that last weld, I went in and changed the inductance setting to a little bit higher setting. And overall, I'm very pleased with my welds. Just like anything else, it's going to take time to learn the welder, and it's also going to take time for me to learn the process behind flux core welding again. So I'm very curious. In another video, I'm going to hook up the shielding gas and try welding with the shielding gas, because I'm very impressed with the initial welds that I'm getting with the flux core. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tone it down a little bit. I'm going to try to do a little bit of sheet metal welding now. This is 16 gauge. So with that, I'm going to come back into the parameters, change the inductance level down to 0, and then I'm going to lower my voltage. I'm going to come down to, I'm going to start off at like 16, maybe even we'll go 15 and a half to run some tack welds on the 16 gauge. So far, so good. Not only is the machine impressing me, I'm kind of impressing myself a little bit with how well I'm flux core welding. It really has been that long, and we'll just chalk it up as the machine making me look good. Let's see, now I have 1/4 inch, which I think is going to be on the higher end of thickness for this machine. So let's see, we are going to go up. We're going to run this sucker. We're going to run it at 175, 21.5 volts. We're going to throw some heat to this thing and see what happens. Bring the inductance up a little bit. Whew. I think with the initial run there, I feel like the drive roller is slipping a little bit. So, but even with that, again, I think the machine is just kind of making me look good. So that is going to wrap up today's review video on the Simder 250D MIG welder. I want to again thank Simder for sending me the welder to review. I am very pleased with the overall performance as far as the setup and use, to be able to pull it right from the box, go through the setup, and then be able to weld in the flux core process, something that I personally haven't done for a very long time, and produce the welds that I did. Makes me comfortable to say that I would recommend this if you are looking for possibly your first welder. The styling is pretty aggressive. It definitely stands out amongst the other welders in the same class. And yeah, I mean, it can weld. So with that, be safe, get out there, go challenge your build. I will see you in an upcoming review and or video. Thanks for watching.